Tonight on the ReidOut.
It will be certainly, I think, my recommendation, my feeling that we should make referrals, but we will get to a decision as a committee, and we will all abide by that decision, and I will join our committee members if they feel differently.
The January 6th hearings return this week, and there are new revelations tonight about who was talking and texting to whom before and during that attack on the Capitol. Plus, a former member of the Oath Keepers joins me tonight as its leader, Stewart Rhodes, gets ready to stand trial, facing allegations he helped to plot the effort to end the transfer of power through violence. Plus, young Iranians are risking everything to demand an end to ultra-conservative religious government oppression and violence against women. And the outrage is only growing. But we begin tonight with the return of the House January 6th committee. We are now less than 48 hours from the committee's next public hearing on Wednesday. Committee members remain mostly tight-lipped about what evidence will be presented, but Congressman Adam Schiff indicated it would be sweeping. Still unclear is whether the committee will bring up a significant allegation from its former technical advisor, Denver Riggleman, who told 60 Minutes that a call was placed by the White House switchboard to a cell phone linked to someone in the mob that day.
You get a real aha moment when you see that the White House switchboard had connected to a rioter's phone while it's happening. That's a pretty big aha moment. You get an aha.
Wait a minute. Someone in the White House was calling one of the rioters while the riot was going on?
On January 6th, absolutely.
And you know who both ends of that call?
I only know one end of that call. I don't know the White House end, which I believe is more important.
Those comments seem to expose tensions between the committee and Riggleman, a former Republican congressman who, like Mark Meadows, was a member of the so-called Freedom Caucus. Committee member Jamie Raskin confirmed that the committee is aware of the call.
Can't say anything specific about that particular call, but we are aware of it, and we're aware of lots of contacts between people in the White House and different people that were involved, obviously, in the coup attempt and the insurrection.
A statement from a committee spokesperson seemed to downplay Riggleman's claim, saying in his role on the Select Committee staff, Mr. Riggleman had limited knowledge of the committee's investigation. He departed from the staff in April prior to our hearings and much of our most important investigative work. According to the CNN, the call in question was made at 4:34 p.m., shortly after the former president released a video telling the mob to go home, and lasted just 9 seconds. Still, in his interview, Riggleman, who is releasing a book on his work with the committee, said that former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' text messages provide a roadmap of the evolution of the January 6th plot. In fact, according to CNN, newly obtained texts show that one of Meadows' communications was with election denier Phil Waldron about a plot to seize voting machines in the key states of Arizona and Georgia. Meanwhile, Riggleman's book also includes details about Trump allies, including former advisor Roger Stone. He noted that investigators identified Stone had 2 calls with former Oath Keepers Chief Stewart Rhodes 9 days after the attack, and calls before and after the 6th with Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio. Well, Tarrio and Rhodes are charged with seditious conspiracy for their involvement. In the meantime, we're getting some indications of what the committee does plan to present on Wednesday. The Washington Post reports the committee intends to show footage of Stone recorded by Danish filmmakers in the weeks leading up to the 6th. And joining me now is Charles Coleman Jr., civil rights attorney, former prosecutor, and MSNBC legal analyst, Peter Strzok, former FBI counterintelligence agent, and Tim Miller, writer at large for The Bulwark and an MSNBC political analyst. Peter, I want to go to you because the committee seems to be kind of trying to downplay what Denver Riggleman had to say. And yes, he's not on the committee staff right now. Yes, he's writing a book. We put all those caveats in place. But I watched that entire 60 Minutes interview, and I have to say, I can't think of an innocent reason anyone in the White House would pick up the phone, even for 9 seconds, and call somebody who is actively engaged in the insurrection in that moment. Can you think of an innocent explanation why the White House switchboard would just happen to connect with one of the insurrectionists?
Well, Joy, it's a good question. I think it is worth noting that the committee, both members specifically like Congressman Raskin, but also broadly, were putting out these statements urging caution. So I do take that with a certain amount of value in terms of how we're evaluating this information. It seems to me that, what we don't want to do is get too focused on any one element that might be rebutted or may not be relevant. And instead, we shouldn't lose focus of the much broader issue here. And that is that we are moving to the point, certainly, that we're seeing January 6th committee doing it, but also the FBI and DOJ and the people they're putting into the grand jury, the people they're charging, communications up to and at the level that are involving people at the White House. We're seeing text after text with Mark Meadows reporting that he not only was in contact with a lot of these January 6 members, but also his active involvement in the efforts to overturn state election results. And so we're seeing a variety of communications that are going now into the White House, right up to and next to Trump. And so when the committee says, hey, let's be careful and cautious about any one particular call, I think that's worth noting, because I do think the risk is if we focus too much on one particular call, we're going to lose sight of the much bigger, much more concerning picture that I anticipate we're going to hear a lot about this coming Wednesday.
Okay, and I think it's fair. That is absolutely fair. But the thing is, and I'm going to go to you on this, Charles, and then I'm going to come back to you in a second, Peter, because what's emerging is that you have Mark Meadows in touch with multiple people, which indicates that he's not playing the role as Trump's chief of staff of trying to stop this, right? And you got a little bit of this from the previous hearings, that the role he's playing seems to be as somebody who's trying to help make the coup happen. This is also some CNN reporting. Phil Waldron, and this guy Phil Waldron, for those of you who don't remember him, he was presented in one of the hearings. He's a former Army colonel. He has this background in information warfare. He's a friend of Michael Flynn, an ally of Michael Flynn. He assembled this 38-slide PowerPoint presentation outlining a plan to overturn the election, sent that PowerPoint to Mark Meadows and to Republican lawmakers, and helped draft this executive order directing the Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security to seize voting machines, work with Rudy Giuliani to gain access to voting systems in states Trump lost. So this guy was very much involved in the coup plot. He's also texting Meadows. Phil Waldron texts Meadows on December 23rd, well before the insurrection, that an Arizona judge had dismissed a lawsuit filed by friendly GOP lawmakers. Waldron characterized Arizona as our lead domino we were counting on to start the cascade, referring to similar states such as Georgia. And Meadows responds, pathetic. This makes me think that this guy is somebody they probably need to hear from live. But what do you make of all of the connections that appear to lead right back to Mark Meadows?
Well, Joy, I've said for a long time that Mark Meadows' testimony and what he knows is absolutely critical if there ever is going to be a concrete link drawn between the actions of many of the rioters on January 6th that were a coordinated effort to overthrow America's democracy and Donald Trump. He is the linchpin that is necessary in order to tie that together. We already know everything we need to about the narrative. We know that these people were unquestionably anti-democratic. They were unquestionably anti-fair election. What we don't know, however, is how much of a connection Donald Trump had to the actual coordination of what we saw happen. And that's why the criminal referrals and the notion of a criminal referral to the DOJ is absolutely paramount. If you get a unanimous criminal referral from this select committee to the DOJ, it puts it squarely on Merrick Garland to actually make a decision, as opposed to not getting that referral or what that referral actually looks like, its contours, and who's named in the referral. So Mark Meadows is absolutely a very key figure in putting all of this together and tying it up in a way that the DOJ and Merrick Garland can actually do something with regard to putting together an indictment and a potential prosecution.
And Tillman, I want to bring you into this conversation, too, because here's the challenge is there's a small group of players whose names keep popping up. It's kind of like the Mueller report, right? You keep hearing the same names. One of those names is obviously Roger Stone. He's somebody who we know had relationships with members of the Proud Boys. He knows the Oath Keepers. He knows these people. He's using some of them as his bodyguards. Now, I want to play a piece of tape. This is from, just to confirm for my producers, I think this is November of 2020. November of 2020. This is Roger Stone talking about what he thinks should be done. Now, we know at this point, Trump has lost. He knows he's lost, but he doesn't want to leave office. And this is, I'm sorry, this is before the election happened. This is before the election happened. Sorry, thanks that my producers corrected me in my ear. Here is Roger Stone. Go.
Excellent. The violence. The voting. Let's get right to the violence.
Let's get right to it.
Shoot to kill. See an Antifa? Shoot to kill. Come. Done with this.
All right, Tim, you're up. This is before the election even happens. Roger Stone says, F the voting. Let's get right to the violence. Your thoughts?
Look, Roger Stone has been a pernicious and criminal element of Donald Trump's team going all the way back to 2015. Peter can talk about this going back to the Mueller report, but Roger Stone has obviously been kind of an outside heavy, if you will, for Donald Trump, dating back to even before he ran for president this last time. It's clearly the case this time. I think one of the things that we could hear more about from January 6th committee or Riggleman, et cetera, is the extent to the conversations he was having with active White House people. We know he was coordinating with the Proud Boys. We know he is in the extended circle of Donald Trump, and that he was meeting with Bannon and some of these other characters at the Willard on the day of January 6th. And so to the extent that you can directly connect him, obviously that makes an impact, but there's a lot that we already know just about his criminal impact in Trump's orbit.